At number 10, Elf on a Shelf reporting to Satan. When two children named John and Daphne were growing up, they had an elf on a shelf named Lucy. She was always a little trickster year after year. But the year after John turned 10 and Daphne turned 7, the habits of the elf changed. Over the holidays, instead of doing innocent tricks and leaving out treats, Lucy began to leave out messages in strange patterns. It asked for tasks to be done, for dolls to be placed in certain weird arrangements. It also asked for strange markings to be drawn in chalk on the garage floor. So then, one day, the children's mother came home after they completed all of these tasks. She was bringing groceries into the garage when she saw it. She dropped everything. Bottled eggnog shattered across the ground, chestnuts rolled across the concrete. Her children had marked out sigils of summoning Satan onto the ground. Lucy the elf sat in the center of the sigil, just staring at her. The children were in a trance. They said Santa would be happy now, and then they started chanting, Santa, Santa, Satan, Satan, and then the family moved out of the house, never to be heard from again. That definitely is an event that could scar you. On to number 9, Elf in Dreams. When David was young, he remembers stories kids would say about the elf on a shelf. One friend told him one specific one. There was a story of a girl who had dreams where the elf would be moving next, and then night after night, her predictions came true. It started off as a fun game. This girl was seeing if she could predict the future. She kept bugging her little sister and telling her, hey, I know where it's gonna be tomorrow, I know where it's gonna be the next day, I'll tell you in the morning, and it happened day after day. But soon she realized that she wasn't really seeing the future. The elf had gotten into her dreams. Slowly, the elf moved throughout the house closer and closer to the little girl's room. In the dreams, it went to the living room, then to the hallway, then right outside her door. But it kept moving towards her little sister's room. At that time, it seemed like it was heading to the back of the house, so she kinda let it be and thought it was leaving. But no. The night before Christmas, she had a dream that the elf went into her little sister's room. She fought herself awake in the middle of the night and moved to her sister's room to protect her, like a good big sister, and she held her to protect her from the elf. But when she woke up, the only thing in her arms wasn't her sister, it was her elf, and her sister had disappeared. And that's where the story ended that David heard. But let's move on to number 8, Gone and Back. So a family in Nevada told a story that they heard from relatives. A cousin had purchased an elf on a shelf kit just a couple years ago and had used it for a bit. But then one year, as they went to retrieve it from storage, they just couldn't find it. It kinda seemed the right time to stop with the elf on a shelf, so they let it go and ignored it. Then years passed, and then when the cousin went looking for some old silverware one time around Thanksgiving, they saw it. The elf on the shelf was just sitting on top of a rubber storage bin where it was lost years ago. It stared right at her. An eerie feeling washed over her, and she moved it to the living room anyways. It's just a doll, right? And maybe it was just a draft. But that night she heard a voice before she fell asleep that said, not enough. And then when she woke up the next day, the elf was gone. It's back and then gone. Just kind of creeped her out. On to number 7, elf choking someone. So, a family decided to get an elf on a shelf for the first time for their son, hoping he would get some enjoyment out of it. The second they got the elf, he already seemed to be weary of it. That first night, the boy woke up with the elf's long, thin red arms around his neck. He was terrified. Rightly so. He could hear his parents walking down the hall and were hoping they would get to him soon. But the pressure was already surmounting and he began choking from it, the arms going around his neck. It almost became too much to bear and then the door opened. The second his parents came into the room, the pressure stopped and all the parents said was, "Aw, he's giving you a hug." And yes, the pressure relented, but only until the next night. On to number 6, elf on a shelf at a daycare. So one family that didn't have an elf on a shelf still had a haunting experience. They regularly had their son Charlie in daycare because they both worked pretty full hours. The daycare had decided to get an elf on a shelf. So the son told his parents that the elf on a shelf just creeped him out. And yes, it moved every day and the parents tried to explain that this was normal, that the elf on the shelf was reporting back to Santa and so it moved, but the opposite of nice was happening at the daycare. It was, instead of it helping keep the kids in line, it seemed to be doing the opposite. There were more reports of toys being tossed around and Charlie kept saying that the elf was doing it. That's what all the kids were saying. The daycare staff told all the parents this and to keep an extra eye on their children because they think the kids were doing it, but then it just kept getting increasingly worse. The children began to say the elf would move, blink at them, turn and look at them, and whisper to them. All of them were too scared to repeat what it said. Then, one day, one kid disappeared from the daycare and the staff were flustered without an explanation. The elf had disappeared too. And then nothing else was said of it and Charlie was pulled out of that daycare. Parents heard nothing of the story again. On to number 5. possessed by a ghost. So one family had an elf on a shelf for years, but it only started acting differently once they moved houses. It went from being a trickster to being much more malicious. Instead of moving at night, it would move during the day. Welcoming messages turned sinister, with repeated messages of, "I'm watching you." Anytime a family member or guest of the house looked at the doll, they would feel an immense pressure on their chest, and a presence around them would feel like it was closing in. It would only stop when they looked away or walked away. Then one night, the youngest in the family went up to touch the elf and fainted on the spot. So after that, they moved the elf to the attic. But just the next day, it came back down and was found in their living room. That family's personal solution was to burn the doll and then sage the entire house, and the legend goes that that seemed to have worked. So pro tips, just so you know. On to number 4, more dolls. The first time the Jennison couple bought the elf on a shelf, they were just really excited. They had one daughter and many dolls throughout the house. They were collectors of a sort. And obviously this was just another token to add to the collection. So when the elf on the shelf arrived, everything began acting strange. The elf on a shelf would be moved to the kitchen, and then the order of all the other dolls were mixed up. Mr. Jennison asked his wife if she was playing a prank on him, but her content expression fell as she revealed she believed he was playing a trick on her. Over the nights, the dolls kept moving, and the tension between the couple grew as they didn't believe one another. Leading up to Christmas Day, the dolls moved closer and closer to the living room, and the couple kind of let the argument rest as it began to seem cute, gathering of all their precious dolls right in one room. But then, on Christmas Day, the smell of smoke woke them up. They ran to the source and in the living room sat their new elf on a shelf facing the fireplace. It faced where all of their dolls lay, on fire, stacked so tall in their fireplace that smoke was coming into the house. The couple started screaming at one another, throwing accusations at the other one. Then their daughter walked into the room, sat on a chair in the corner, and looked at the elf in the center of the room with a smile, watching her parents argue. On to number 3. A child turned into one. So one urban legend is that the story goes that the elf on the shelf isn't truly an elf at all, but a lesson. Apparently, the naughty list was so rampant that the North Pole deemed that a message should be sent to all of the children. They had gone too far. It was decided that the best way to keep children in line was to make examples out of them. And so legend has it that it's not an elf on your shelf, but a child trapped forever in a doll looking out for your mistakes, hoping to one day be free. Free him. On to number 2, Voodoo doll. So in one neighborhood between December 1st and 10th, a lot of families that had elves on shelves said they kept going missing. Even if they replaced them, gone again. There was no apparent reason. All of these families were wondering where they had gone until one day a boy of the neighborhood was passing by a quiet house on a corner. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw in the window a cat with a familiar elf in its mouth. In his excitement, he went to tell his family, and the family returned to the house. They found that the front door was open and they decided to explore. Most of the house was desolate, save for some dusty furniture, and no one answered when they were calling out. But one room in the house was quite full. Elves from Elves on a Shelf lined the shelves of an old study. There were hundreds. All of them had pins and needles stuck inside their bodies. The family walked in and saw one elf on a shelf sitting by its lonesome right across from them. Their son ran to it thinking it was theirs, calling out its name. Then they heard laughter behind them. "So it works," an old man's voice said, and the family screamed. Who knows what happened, but only one family member escaped. The little boy was found wandering the local park in the snow, clutching the elf, taking pins out of its body. His parents never to be found again. And number 1, being watched. To save money, one family decided to get an elf on a shelf doll used. They got one from a man who said his family grew out of it and wanted to pass it along. They moved it throughout the holidays, mainly keeping it in the main area, but moved it to the kids' room every once in a while. They began to hear a whirring and buzzing noise coming off it. First they brushed it off as the radiator, and then it was close to the fridge, so that was another way to brush it off. But when it was in their daughter's room, she said she heard beeping. The parents were thrown by this since they kept technology out of their daughter's room and there was no reason for there to be a buzz. They ripped open the doll to find hardware in it and a camera, right where the eyes were. After going to the police, they found out that the man who sold them the doll was wanted for a myriad of crimes. And so, watch out for used dolls.
Starting us off at number 10 is Pennywise the Elf. Now elves I can definitely do, but not when they look like the clown of my literal nightmares and lucid dreams, which is exactly what this one is. Like, this elf is straight up sitting on this fireplace with a face that could kill. I don't even know if that's Pennywise trying to smile but just inherently looking creepy or what, but I'm royally screwed up about it. The parents that put this one up didn't just want their kids to just be nice kids, they wanted their kids to straight up be terrified of them, of Santa Claus, of being bad. They wanted their kids to regret every single bad thing they ever did. Who even made this? Where do you even get an elf like that? I'm just so confused. Like, is this like a special order elf? This elf has literally eaten other kids and is going to eat the kids of whichever house it's in now, so don't say I didn't freaking warn you, cause I did. Coming in at number 9 are the 3. What the hell is going on in this gif, you guys? What is this? We have 3 elves all with white glazed over eyes, and they're out here just chopping up 2 other elves. I feel like the middle female elf is in charge of what's happening. She's got stitches going across her forehead, she has these creepy pointy teeth, and you can see blood in her mouth, so clearly she's not only a scary elf, she's a cannibalistic one. And what I always say, you guys, in every video, well, the videos that apply, don't trust people who eat their own kind. That's like rule number 1. That's the first rule you should learn when you come out of the womb. You know what I mean? And why are they killing these poor elves? And it's just gory as well. The one on the right looks like a baby elf, like it's so small and they proper gutted it, intestines out and everything. The one on the left is getting his arm chopped off, so let's just say I'm very glad I'm not either of those elves, because I'd be screwed. And number 8, we have the zombie elf. I don't know who would think of an elf and be like, you know what, he's most likely a zombie, BRB while I fix him up. Like, I don't see the link between both at all unless the person happened to be watching The Walking Dead at the same time and got inspired. Like, that's the only logical explanation for all of this, and I fully believe that. Now, this elf's head is peeling off, his eyes are yellow and red, he's got pointed teeth with his jaw exposed because it's either been eaten off by another zombie elf or he got hungry and just ate it off himself. Sometimes you can't wait for dinner, what can you say? I've been that person. But the worst part is that his ribs are exposed because his skin has melted off, and oh, his intestines are coming out as well. I'm so confused, like, is this a Christmas thing or is it a Halloween thing? Like, someone please tell me what's going on. Filling on number 7 slot is family. I don't think there's a single thing about this photo that doesn't creep me out. Firstly, the elf's eyes are just staring at me a certain way, making me feel guilty when I know I haven't done anything wrong. Secondly, he's sitting so calmly like he just hatched an evil plan to kill me, and looking at me just putting him at peace. He's just so happy looking at me knowing I'm gonna die. And that's just him alone. Now we can get onto the 5 picture frames, all of varying sizes of this elf. Like, what did you do with the rest of my family? And why are all these pictures like those preteen photo shoots that girls do with their friends? Like, if I got home and saw this, I would 100% know that this elf has caused harm and will cause harm again. To me, specifically. And now number 6 is Mr. Sparkles. What the hell is this? I don't even know what creature this is, but it does have fantastic bone structure, I will give it that. Those cheekbones are honestly sharper than the knife some of my friends have used to stab me in the back. I love my jokes, I really do. Anyway, Mr. Sparkles was marketed as an alternative elf for your shelf, and I feel like we have very different definitions of alternative. It looks like Sparkles' face has melted, his nose is fully not there, I don't know where it is, I wasn't able to locate it for this video, I'm sorry about that. His smile is also melting off, so there's that. He looks like he wants to kill himself and that he already did, but his maker was like, nah, you ain't getting off that easy, I'ma sculpt you back together. And I feel like no one is buying this. Like, I appreciate your effort, but nobody is buying this. Coming in at number 5 is Mum of the Year. Around 2 Christmases ago, Brittany Meese admitted she's that over-the-top Christmas perfect mum. Her family elf is called Elvis, and so one day when her kids weren't looking, Brittany tried to move the elf, but they came back into the room too early, so she kind of just shoved Elvis into the oven thinking she'd move him later. Completely forgetting Elvis in there for a few days, she went on to cook something for the kids and turned on the oven. You can well imagine what happened next. Elvis got burnt and mangled to a level no elf should ever be. His head was almost sinking into himself. His feet were melted, his neck was melted, it was truly a tragedy. Now when looking at the show, one of her kids started hysterically crying, one started screaming, one started bugging Brittany to call Santa so he could save Elvis, and the other kid was just glad the snitch was dead. Which kid would you be in this situation? I'd 100% be the last. Snitch is dead, bye. And number 4 is the serial killer elf. Now there's so many things an elf should be. I'm talking cute, willing to make and distribute presents, be a sweet friend, and maybe a shoulder to cry on if need be. But the one thing that they definitely should not be are serial killers, and that's exactly what this one is. He's literally wearing the Hannibal mask, and I'm like, dude, just eat me now and just save me the horror, honestly. The elf's got blood on his gloves, on his shirt, on his face, it's seeping out of his hairline. Like, did he just eat one elf or did he devour the whole population? And can you just stop for a second? Can we all just stop and imagine the effort that went into making this elf-sized Hannibal mask just for this elf on a shelf? Like, these parents went to a great deal of effort to be weirdly bizarre. I mean, if that's your king, you can go for it. Filling on number 3 slot is red rum. I always saw people getting red rum tattoos and writing it everywhere when I was growing up, and it took me so long to figure out that it said murder backwards. And I was like, oh wow, so edgy and hipster, you guys. Haha, you're so cool. But this elf on a shelf is the furthest thing from hipster, and is actually the closest thing to haunting you in your sleep. It's literally sitting in the bathroom, not even on a shelf, and it's holding a bloody knife. And if it was a blunt knife, I would have been like a lot more okay with it, but it's freaking serrated, you guys. You know serrated serrated knife is serious. We're not screwing around with a serrated knife. Like, you already know that will cut deep. Like, it'll cut you the way you cut a piece of lamb and you can see the muscle fibers just tearing. Like, that's gonna be you. Congrats. Merry Christmas. Now, above the elf and weapon is the word red room written in what looks to be blood. Like, whose blood is that, mate? Is it one of the parents that brought you and put you there? Is it one of the kids doing drugs in that bathroom? Like, who did you kill? I need to know. But I'm just glad it's not me, so I don't really care. Now, at number 2 is Billy the puppet. Now, if you've seen any of the Saw movies, then you know how gruesome they are, and you also know the feeling of wanting to take Billy the puppet and rip him a new one. I've never wanted to kill a puppet more in my entire life than I've wanted to kill that one, so you already know what's going on. This elf isn't even on a shelf, it's on the toilet roll dispenser in someone's house, and it's wearing the mask of Billy the puppet. And it's not even bloody toilet paper on the dispenser, it's duct tape. You know, the kind of serial killer puts on your mouth before he tortures you for information you don't even have? Yeah, that kind. And the cherry on top is the sign next to the elf that says, I want to play a game. Like, imagine these kids just looking forward to Christmas and trying to have such a jolly December, but they can't because their parents are freaking freaks and want them to shit themselves out of fear, not need, every time they go to the bathroom. Like, I just don't need that negative energy in December. I don't need it. The decade is over. I don't need you being weird around me. Like, what does that even imply? Like, if I was naughty this year, you're gonna cut my arm off? Like, is that what I take from this? Like, what is happening? And finally, at number 1 is the monster elf. Bro, what the hell is this? It was being sold as a horror demon evil elf on the shelf, and I was like, say no more. I'm not purchasing this. If I saw this in my house, I would actually just full on move house, no hesitation. I feel like this isn't even something parents would buy. This is something that would just end up in your house on its own accord somehow. But to its credit, I feel like that's what actual elves do look like. They don't look like that cute small human versions we actually see. But to its credit, I feel like that's what actual elves look like. They don't look like the small cute human versions that we actually see. The reality is in fact that creepy. I just hate the full black eyes and the lines going through its eyes and its mouth. Like, why? That was a design feature that just didn't need to be there. If that was in my room, I know it would give me nightmares. Like, how can it not looking like that? That's the kind of doll that either possesses you or kills your whole family. There is a no in between. And for the full frontal view, here is a picture. Need I say more? I don't think so.
Elf on the Shelf is a Christmas tradition in which families buy this creepy little elf to place in their home. This elf is said to watch kids every day as a spy for Santa to see who's been naughty or nice. But these elves are naughty themselves, as they have set homes on fire and played nasty pranks on its owners. Starting off this countdown, we have the reappearing elf. So this story was posted on Reddit, and this user claims that it's a real story. So one day during the holiday season, they were unboxing all their Christmas decorations. You know, trying to decorate and get in the festive spirit. But while going through their boxes, they noticed their elf on a shelf was missing. Apparently, they always placed it in its original packaging so the little small toy wouldn't get lost. But this year, it wasn't in the box at all. After searching for several minutes, they gave up and just decorated the house without it. But several days later, the elf randomly showed up on top of some boxes, just right in plain sight. This person literally searched all over for this elf, and then it just magically appeared right in front of his eyes. That's pretty creepy if you ask me. I'm telling you, those things are cursed. Moving on to number 9, we have the living doll, and if you guys are liking this video, obviously give it a big thumbs up, you know, spread some holiday joy. This story surrounds an elf on the shelf that would move by itself without a member of the family moving it. Now, the dad just thought that his family was playing mind games with him. Every morning, the elf would be in a new spot, but everyone swore that they didn't touch it. The dad, being fed up with this, decided to set up the dog cam one night and pointed it directly at the elf. The next day, of course, the elf was moved, and again, his family swore that they didn't touch it. The dad, thinking that he caught his family moving the elf, went to review the footage, but he found something quite horrifying. The footage showed the doll moving on its own. His family was right. They weren't touching it. The doll was alive and moving by itself. Coming in at number 8, we have the whispers. Kids often have a wild imagination, which is why some parents don't always believe what their kids are telling them, especially if what they are saying sounds downright impossible. So one night this young girl went crying to her mother, telling her that she woke up to the elf on the shelf whispering evil things into her ear. Of course, the mother just brushed it off and told her that she was just having a nightmare. But this continued to happen. The girl would often wake up screaming after hearing a creepy voice whisper in her ear. The doll would tell her to do things like to go hurt her sister or parents. The mother started to get concerned, so one night she decided to sleep in the same bed as her daughter. And sure enough, around 3 a.m. she woke up to the sound of someone breathing in her ear. She turned, and laying beside her was the elf on the shelf. Moving on to number 7, we have the invisible voices. Okay, this next story is pretty creepy. I don't know what to make of it. So one day in the middle of December, a family was startled when their Amazon Alexa started going off by itself. It was talking as if someone else was talking to it, but no one was in the room. Initially, they ignored it, thinking that it was just some glitch. But this happened a few times every day. And Alexa would start saying scary things like, "I'm sorry, I can't find any results for 'I'm coming for you,' or 'I can't find any results for 'take me off this shelf.'" When they heard the last one, they noticed that the elf on the shelf was right beside the Alexa. So they believed that somehow the elf was sentient and could communicate with their Alexa. So there you go, maybe Alexas can communicate with ghosts now. Making our way down the list, number 6, we have the family tradition. So this creepypasta story surrounds a little girl named Jenna, her older sister, and her family. So part of her family's tradition is to always set up the elf on the shelf. Jenna in particular believes that the elf is real and that it really does move by itself. So one morning they woke up to find that the elf had been moved, but no one had touched it. The mom really had no clue where the elf went, and she's normally the one that would move it. The mom was scared how Jenna would react to the elf missing, but she was so happy about this. She told her family that last night she talked to the elf and told it to go check in on her older sister, who lived about an hour away from them. And sure enough, when her sister woke up, the elf was in her house sitting on top of her coffee machine. This of course freaked everyone out, especially that sister, who was too scared to even move the toy. So at night, she gave it a cookie and talked to it. She said, "Hey, thanks for checking in on me, but I really don't need it. I think Jenna really needs you, so take this cookie for Santa and then please return home." Believe it or not, the next day the elf was back at Jenna's house, cookie in hand. Okay, that one is like somewhat sweet, but mainly creepy. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the possession. So for some reason, ghosts or demons love to possess kids' toys, especially dolls. I mean, take a look at Annabelle, for example, or Robert the doll. Those dolls are evil. But now we have elves on the shelves to worry about. So this next couple decided as a joke to order an elf on the shelf online. But instead of ordering it from, like Walmart or Target, they decided to order it off of the dark web. The doll was marketed as a possessed elf on the shelf, and they thought it was a good idea to actually buy this. And what do you know? Upon opening it and putting it on their shelf, paranormal things started to happen. Like seriously, what did they expect? Anyways, they were haunted by this elf for months, and it definitely ruined their holiday season. But also, that's what you get. Coming in at number 4, we have the prankster elf. So this next family apparently owned an elf on the shelf that was quite the troublemaker. They would go to bed and the next day their house would be a mess. One time their dog's bowl of food was knocked all over the floor. Another time they found thumbtacks scattered all over the floor. Another time they found a bottle of wine knocked over and spilled everywhere. But everyone in the family denies that they did any of these pranks. Now it could just be their dog doing this, but they just found it weird how at every prank scene they would find the elf nearby. Could it be their family just messing with them? Or is their elf on the shelf alive? In our 3rd spot, we have the fires. Don't mess with these elves, because legend goes that they can set your house on fire. So there's this creepy story out there that says one Christmas in 2010, a bunch of families' homes unexpectedly caught on fire. When firefighters investigated, they found that every home had one thing in common. Upon entering their house, they found their elf on the shelf in the middle of the house, in perfect condition. The floor would be burnt and charred, but somehow the elf remained untouched. Quite odd. So it's believed that these sinister elves might have had something to do with these fires. In our second spot, we have the family of elves. So according to the instructions that comes with the elf on a shelf, you are not supposed to touch it. If you do, the elf loses its magic, or something along those lines. It's basically a way for parents to deny ever moving the elves. But in this story, a little naughty boy ended up ignoring these rules and touched the elf. The next day, the boy was nowhere to be found. But beside the elf was another mini elf on the shelf. This time, the elf looked an awful lot like the missing boy. Days went on and the family began to worry. That's when the dad accidentally touched the elf while cleaning the fireplace. The next day, he went missing too, and now there were 3 elves on the fireplace mantle. This elf looked a lot like the dad. Eventually, the entire family of 5 went missing. And when police investigated, they found 5 elves on the mantle, 1 for each member of the family. And in our number 1 spot, we have the elf on a shelf with a knife. This creepypasta has to be the creepiest story on this list. So once upon a time, there were 2 brothers. One brother was quite naughty, and all year round would cause trouble. But during the holidays, he tried to act nice, knowing that his grandma had the elf on the shelf and it was watching him. So he tried to act nice so that the elf would report back to Santa saying that he was a good boy. That was until one day him and his brother Neil were wrestling when they knocked over the tree and some ornaments broke. The boy was horrified, for the elf was there watching it happen, and he knew that Neil would tattletale on him. So he took matters into his own hands. He ended up killing his brother and skinning his face. He then wore his face like a mask and used it to trick the elf. He went up to the elf with his brother's face mask and started apologizing and taking the blame for the accident. When his grandma came home, he fake cried and said Neil's death was an accident.
Yeah, okay, his face just accidentally came off, okay there.
The story ends with a boy locked away in the hospital for Christmas. But he's not mad about this. In fact, he's really happy. To him, this meant that he successfully tricked the elf on the shelf, since he's still got Christmas presents.